We were full of anticipation as we waited for the arrivals at the airport's luggage claim area. My brother-in-law, Bob, came with his 2 young girls, Danica, who is 9, and 7-year-old Louise, to join my 12-year-old son, David, and my 9-year-old daughter, Sheila. The children excitedly displayed a large banner that said, "Welcome home, mommies." A fortnight earlier, my spouse Mandy and her sibling Helen had embarked on a trip to Belize's sandy shores, seeking respite from the biting cold of Minnesota's winter, particularly in January. As the passengers from the flight began to appear at the doorway, the children's enthusiasm overflowed, and they erupted into cheers upon seeing their mothers. Both ladies appeared radiant, their tans and smiles enhancing their beauty. Mandy lovingly embraced David and Sheila, showering them with hugs and kisses. She then turned to me, delivering a fervent kiss as a reward. Holding her in my arms, I was reluctant to release her, expressing how much I had missed her. "Just wait until tonight," she murmured into my ear, hinting at her longing to show me the extent of her missing me. Indeed, that evening, she fulfilled her earlier hint with conviction. Even after a decade and a half of matrimony, she understands me deeply, including my fondness for tan lines. Once the children were asleep, we didn't hesitate to retreat to our bedroom. "Darling, climb into bed and await my return from the bathroom," she instructed. Shortly, I lay in bed, anticipating her return. Moments later, Mandy stepped out of the bathroom donning a bikini. Mandy's most captivating trait has always been her radiant face, always ready to smile. Yet, she is her own toughest critic, often feeling she's either too petite or too slender. The pregnancies had the unexpected effect of enhancing her bust size. The thong bikini accentuated her figure perfectly, yet the best was still to come. At the bed's end, Mandy flaunted her beach-acquired tan. Gradually, she slid her thong down, unveiling subtle tan lines where the straps had been, with her private areas remaining their untouched porcelain hue. As she unfastened her bikini top, letting it drape over her bosom, excitement mounted. Eventually, the bikini dropped to the ground, exposing her petite bust. I quickly moved to the bed's edge, grasped her by the waist, and drew her close, lavishing her with kisses and tender touches. She reciprocated with zeal, reaching the height of pleasure within minutes. I took pleasure in her body's natural fragrance on several occasions. She conveyed her longing for me and found my sentiments endearing, expressing joy at being home again. We spent a significant portion of the night rekindling our connection. A few days later, while Mandy was cleaning the bathtub, she playfully remarked about having enjoyed the lovely hallway view. She chuckled and moved closer, her body pressing against mine in a teasing manner. Typically, I would respond by pressing back to enhance the contact, but this time, a sudden unease gripped me. I couldn't explain it, but something about the situation felt amiss, though I couldn't quite identify what it was. Mandy, growing impatient with my non-responsive behavior to her flirtation, voiced her displeasure, commenting that I was all talk and no action, like most men. After a final push of her hips, she turned to retrieve the gloves from the sink, deciding it was best to finish cleaning the bath. It was then that a minor detail that had nagged at my subconscious came to light. I turned ashen, excused myself to the garage, and left without concern for whether Mandy heard me or not. In the garage, I sat on the workbench, engulfed in my thoughts, troubled by the revelation I had stumbled upon. The thought that Mandy might have been unfaithful during her trip to Belize consumed me. I was certain of one thing. If Mandy had made any effort, it wouldn't have been difficult for her to find a willing partner. The only explanation that made sense for what I had observed was that she had attempted something with her sister during their vacation. What actions would I take if it turned out she had been unfaithful? The answer was unequivocal. I would leave her instantly, despite the pain it would cause, particularly to our 2 children. Why would she act this way towards me, towards us? Do I really make such a terrible spouse? These inquiries spun in my mind for the remainder of the night. Although I strongly suspected infidelity, I lacked proof. How could I possibly be certain? The potential betrayal, if it took place, was committed 3,000 miles away in a different nation. I'm unable to confront her directly. She would just refute it. Is it possible for me to confront her sister? I toyed with the notion, yet the two siblings were equally intransigent. All my life, I've been familiar with sisters' dynamics. If one was unfaithful, it's likely the other was too. I needed to discuss my doubts with Bob. Later, I heard Mandy's voice calling out to me, prompting my return to the house. "What made you stay in the garage for such a long time?" Mandy questioned. "I was just tidying up a bit," I responded nonchalantly. Then, an idea occurred to me. I had no desire to share a bed with her. Besides, I've come down with a cold that struck me earlier today. I believe I'll spend the next few nights on the sofa. Mandy appeared discontented. "Fine. I'll prepare some herbal tea for you before sleep. Chamomile might be soothing," she offered. After Mandy retired to bed, I was left to ponder alone, my mind hopping from one thought to the next. Why did she do it? What actions should I take? Should I consult Bob to confirm whether Helen was unfaithful? Eventually, I figured out a surefire method to determine if Mandy had been unfaithful. She had a routine of keeping in contact with all her social circles. Mandy had about 600 to 700 friends on Facebook, and even more contacts in her Yahoo address book. If she had communicated with someone from Belize, I was certain they would have exchanged details through email to maintain contact. Yet, I doubted she would use her usual email account since we both knew each other's passwords. I drifted off to sleep, and by the next day, a strategy began to take shape. Drained and finding it hard to focus at my job, I arranged a meeting with a divorce attorney for the upcoming Friday. Then I reached out to Bob, proposing we meet for lunch. Surprised, he consented, and I divulged my findings. At first, he chuckled, but I quickly persuaded him of the gravity of the situation. He agreed to look into whether Helen had been unfaithful to him. Feigning a severe case of the flu, I left work early and was home by 3 p.m. I immediately set up a keystroke logging program on our family computer. It was a week later when I uncovered the reality. Mandy had been using an alternate email account named Beach Dreams 1975, with our kids' names and birth years as the password. Shortly after her trip from Belize, she began communicating daily with a man named Brad. The email exchanges were quite revealing for both Mandy and Helen. Helen was romantically involved with a man named Steve. I forwarded all the incriminating emails and wiped any evidence of my investigation. I then sent the emails to Bob from my own email account. It became clear they had been intimately involved almost since the start of their trip to Belize and had plans to meet again in Chicago the following month. The women would feign a shopping trip, while their male friends would pretend to be at a Chicago Blackhawks game. A quick review of Mandy and Helen's Facebook profiles showed they had recently added Brad Simmons and Steve Reiner, both from Illinois and both married, as friends. I had the evidence I needed. I faced a daunting task ahead. Bob refused to believe that Helen and Mandy were being unfaithful, so I kept my suspicions to myself. He couldn't fathom his wife being unfaithful, a feeling I could relate to. Despite Mandy's affectionate behavior towards me and our children, it was difficult to accept she might end our marriage. She seemed so caring and devoted that at times I questioned my own judgment. It was comforting. Wanting to restore normal intimacy, I called Bob at his office. I greeted him as Jack and inquired whether he could access his personal email at work. He confirmed he could and asked if I had sent him something. I instructed him to read all the messages and then call me back. After a 30-minute wait, Bob called, his voice filled with shock and rage. I soothed him, assuring him I had a plan and needed his cooperation. We had to keep our knowledge from them, and I expressed my wish to make Mandy pay. Bob was on board with the plan and shared his own desire for retribution. I directed him to make a call home, leave a message to inform that he'd be working late, and to join me at a pub in the Old Town later that evening. During our initial strategy session, I proposed to Bob that using embarrassment could be an effective tactic against our spouses. Initially quiet, Bob eventually concurred with my suggestion. I pointed out that Tom, our father-in-law, had a particular affection for his 2 daughters, to which Bob signaled his agreement with a nod. I disclosed that Tom had a deep-seated dislike for unfaithful spouses, detailing how his former wife, Mandy, and Helen's mother, had been unfaithful throughout their marriage. Bob, with a cunning grin, remarked that there was nothing Tom despised more than unfaithful wives. We agreed to leverage this knowledge to shame Mandy and Helen in the presence of their family and friends. I laid out my strategy, clarifying that we had a mere 2 weeks to behave as attentive husbands, and I counseled Bob to emulate my actions. I advised him to feign illness with a cold, work overtime, and claim to be too ill or exhausted for intimate relations, suggesting we maintain minimal physical contact to maintain appearances. That night, I came home exceptionally late, feigning a severe headache. Although the thoughts of our vengeful scheme occupied my mind, I quickly succumbed to sleep, mindful of the forthcoming deceit. When Mandy brought up a shopping excursion to Chicago with Helen, I expressed my wholehearted support for the plan. To demonstrate affection and support, I even made a hotel reservation with our shared credit card for Mr. and Mrs. Johnston, expecting Helen and Mandy to share the room. Bob proposed to cover the cost for a room booked under Mr. and Mr. Roche, with both of us arranging the details so that each woman believed we were booking a single room, oblivious to the fact that their paramours would be present. The women intended to take the upcoming Friday off, fly out to Chicago in the morning, and catch a late return flight on Sunday. The week after, I discussed with Tom Raines, Mandy's father, my idea for a surprise family gathering in Chicago, coinciding with the kids' presence and just 2 weeks following our 15th wedding anniversary, which Tom found to be a splendid idea. I requested Tom to reserve 3 hotel rooms, anticipating that it would be an unexpected delight. Bob and I were incensed by the conduct of our spouses. On the day we took them to the airport, they were overly excited, laughing incessantly and exuding nervous excitement, reminiscent of young girls on their first date. At the security checkpoint, we pecked them on the cheek, and they failed to notice that neither Bob nor I professed our love. Bob drove us back to the city, and I promptly phoned the private investigator I had engaged. I checked to ensure that all arrangements for their stay in Chicago were in order. The following day, we all convened at the airport. During the flight, Tom swapped seats with my son David to sit beside me, and sensing that something was wrong, he inquired about the issue, observing that Bob and I appeared as though we were on our way to a funeral. I apologized for not informing him earlier and shared the distressing news of our wives' infidelity. I elaborated that a private detective was gathering evidence for a divorce, and we planned to file as soon as we caught them in the act with their lovers. Tom expressed his sadness, offering a comforting hand on my shoulder, and lamented that the years they spent with him hadn't been enough to steer them right. Overcome with emotion, Tom began to weep, expressing disbelief at the pain he was experiencing once more, before regaining his composure and returning to his seat. Upon our arrival at the Chicago airport, Alan White welcomed us and handed Bob and me 2 envelopes. Inside were damning photos and a DVD documenting the previous night's activities. He updated us that a process server would be in touch shortly and that his operative was keeping watch on the bedrooms. His assistant would alert us at the most incriminating moment to confront the lovers. By midday, the wives of Simmons and Reiner would receive similar packages. We requested that Tom and Alan take care of the children for a bit, as we needed time to evaluate the situation. My spirits plummeted when I saw Mandy in a variety of explicit poses, including a disturbing image with 2 men. It appeared they had engaged in unprotected intimacy, prompting Bob and me to consider STD testing in Minneapolis. Alan phoned his aide to confirm the hotel was vacant since the couple had gone out for a meal. Tom requested 3 pizzas, and we asked for an extra key card for rooms 201 and 203, which were booked under our names. The front desk clerk issued both key cards after verifying our identification. To prevent our wives from becoming suspicious, we told the hotel staff that our kids had organized a surprise. We proceeded to the 3rd floor where our accommodations were situated. An hour later, Alan rang to say the couple had returned from their lunch and had swapped partners. Mandy was now with Reiner, and Helen with Simmons. Alan let me know he was in the lobby and that the process server had just arrived. I ended the call and happily informed the kids it was time to depart. Remember what I've instructed you, Sheila, and you as well, David. Grandpa and I will go into the room first, and when I signal, you yell, "Surprise, Mom." Got it. No worries, Dad, David replied, and we stay out until you say so, right? Exactly, we've got it all down, Dad. Let's go. We ascended the stairs and paused outside room 201. I used the key to silently unlock the door. Mom and I entered first, followed by the 2 kids. But they didn't hold back. As soon as the door cracked open, they yelled, "Surprise, Mom." "We're here." Mandy, caught in the act with Reiner, was indeed taken aback. Reiner quickly got dressed and exited. Mandy leaped from the bed, trying to compose herself. "No, this can't be happening. What are you all doing here?" she cried out. "Look, Mommy's not wearing clothes," Sheila piped up, squeezing past Tom and me. I snapped my fingers, and the process server stepped into the room. "Mandy Johnston?" he inquired, addressing the sole undressed woman. "That's my mom," Sheila chimed in helpfully. The server handed Mandy an envelope, stating, "You've been served," and snapped a photo of her clutching the envelope, trying to cover herself. He then departed. I encouraged the kids to give their mother space to dress. We left the room, leaving Mandy in tears on the floor, fully cognizant of the envelope's contents. In the hallway, I met Bob and his kids and shared that the confrontation with Helen hadn't gone smoothly. Simmons, having been caught in the act, became hostile. Tom received a punch to the face. Bob, without hesitation, showed his disapproval by striking Simmons. In a laudable move, Helen defended her father by scratching Simmons' face. I entered the fray, removed Simmons, and flung him into the bathroom, out of sight of the children, along with his attire. "Get dressed and leave, you scoundrel," I commanded. Tom, Bob, and the kids left the room, devoid of embarrassment. Helen, draped in a blanket, followed. Her father sternly told her, "Return to the room and get dressed." She obeyed, retreating to the bedroom like a chastened child. The process server, who had vanished during the commotion, re-emerged at the door. "Ellen de Roche?" "Yes," she answered. He handed her the envelope, announcing, "You're served." We all made our way back upstairs. The original plan was to stay overnight and have a final discussion with our wives, but I no longer had the desire to share a room with Mandy. I collected our bags and told the children we were heading home. Tom chose to remain. He had much to discuss with his daughters. 4 months later, Bob and his family rejoined us in Minneapolis. Despite Mandy's repeated requests for forgiveness, the court reviewed our case and granted a straightforward divorce. The house was awarded to me as it was an inheritance from my parents before Mandy and I were married. I obtained the main custody of our kids, even though I hadn't requested it. Tom took care of their needs. We split our possessions equally, and the next Christmas, Tom presented me with a substantial monetary gift to assist me financially. He made it clear that this sum was from Mandy's anticipated inheritance. Bob went through a similar divorce process, with their home being joint property. But not long after their separation, Bob and Helen started seeing each other again, and I'm pretty sure they will reconcile. It's regrettable, As for Mandy and myself, I'm determined never to reconcile with her. I partially accepted her apologies and believe she still has feelings for me. However, her infidelity utterly destroyed my love for her, leaving it buried in the remnants of her deceit on the shores of Belize. I can't find it in me to love her again, not even for our children's sake. We maintain a cordial relationship, but that's as far as it goes. One time, while Mandy was waiting for the kids, she asked how I discovered what happened in Belize. I told her it was due to my fondness for tan lines. She was confused, noting that she always wore a bikini and we never went to the beach. I reminded her to consider what she did before cleaning the bathroom with various cleaning agents. She recounted that she would gather her supplies, wear plastic gloves, and roll up her sleeves. I then reminded her that she always removed her rings first, including her engagement and wedding bands, which is why there was no tan line on her finger. I've always held the belief that life is full of unexpected twists. Sometimes they're positive, and other times they leave a profound mark. This tale is about one such unexpected event, a night that began well but concluded in a manner I could never have predicted. Jenna and I had been seeing each other for a short time after meeting at a friend's gathering where we instantly clicked. Jenna's infectious laughter and her knack for making everyone feel valued were undeniable. Our differences brought excitement to our relationship rather than issues. One night, we chose to go out on a date. We started with a meal at La Bella, an intimate Italian eatery in the city center. The ambience was inviting, the cuisine was scrumptious, and our chat was engaging. Later in the evening, Jenna proposed we visit Murphy's Dive, a popular bar among our acquaintances and colleagues. I agreed, thinking it was an excellent way to cap off the night with friends and drinks. Upon arrival, Murphy's was bustling with the sounds of friendly chatter, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. We socialized, caught up with friends, and the night seemed flawless. A few hours in, I excused myself to the restroom. Inside, I spotted shoes I recognized beneath a stall door. I hesitated, trying to identify them, when a voice I knew all too well said, "Do that thing." It was unmistakably a colleague's voice. Realizing those were Jenna's shoes, I was overwhelmed with feelings of anger, betrayal, and shock. I immediately went to the bar, requested separate checks, paid for my portion, and left Murphy's without waiting for Jenna. I drove without direction, attempting to make sense of the situation. I ended up at an all-night diner, ordered a black coffee, and stared into it, its bitterness mirroring my feelings. I didn't return home that night. Instead, I stayed at my friend Mike's house. He's the type of friend who offers support without prying. He just gave me a beer, and we spent the night playing video games until morning. My phone was inundated with messages. Jenna had sent numerous texts and there were several missed calls. She was apologetic, claiming it was a drunken mistake, but it all just seemed like empty words to me. I took a few days off from work, not ready to confront my colleague or the inevitable office rumors. Mike and I passed the time watching series and overindulging in delivery food. It was a welcome distraction. After a week, I agreed to meet Jenna. We were sitting in the park when she began to weep profusely. She insisted it was meaningless and that she regretted it immediately. I was overcome with a sense of numbness. I expressed to her that I required some time alone to contemplate. A part of me suspects it might have been a singular error, yet another part doubts if I'll ever be able to trust her again. What actions would you take in my place? I made a significant mistake. I created a post on a subreddit expressing my desire for an open relationship, which my husband discovered, resulting in a major argument filled with harsh words. Distraught, I left the house to take a stroll. A colleague, the same man I was interested in for an open relationship, phoned me and asked me over to his place. In my frustration, I agreed to it. So, I requested that he pick me up, and we headed to his place, had some drinks, and watched television. Feeling adventurous, I initiated a move, but it turned out to be a letdown. He disregarded me, returned his attention to the television, and after an hour, he began to get physically close to me. I didn't resist, but the intimacy felt awful. He declined to perform oral sex on me, blaming a sore tongue from eating Pringles, so we proceeded to have intercourse, which was uncomfortable. He neglected to withdraw. After the act, he resumed watching television, and I returned home. On my walk back, I came to the realization that I was simply seeking excitement to break away from the monotony. The actual experience of intimacy outside my marriage fell short of what I had anticipated. My husband, with his expertise, is much more satisfying. I was overly critical in my previous post, making negative comments about his size, but upon reflection, he measures around 7 inches, which isn't small at all. I allowed a fantasy to cloud my judgment. When I arrived back home, I found my husband in the kitchen, not acknowledging my presence. He prepared pasta, ate alone, and chose to sleep in the living room, tossing a towel in my direction. I ended up falling asleep again after locating a rug. I attempted to engage him in conversation on the couch, but he continued to ignore me. I awoke early, chilled due to the heater being off in my room, which gave me additional time to reflect. I acknowledged my mistakes and recognized the need to improve as a wife. Throughout the day, I tried to communicate with my husband, but he remained indifferent. When I made an advance towards him, he turned me down and left the room, an action he had never taken before. Even when he was exhausted, he would at least reciprocate my advances. But today, he appeared to have no interest in anything. I didn't see him eat or drink anything all day, he just seemed weary. When I attempted to have a serious discussion with him, he stood up and exited the house. My calls to him were redirected to his voicemail, so I sent him a text declaring my love and emphasizing the importance of discussing our marriage. He responded that he no longer desired a conversation or a marriage with me, and planned to stay elsewhere until after the new year. Upon his return, he expects me to have vacated the premises. He stated that he owned the house, had contacted a lawyer, and wished for all future communication to be through her, not on his previous phone number. I discovered he's staying at my sister's place, and I'm concerned she might make an advance on him, as she is attractive and single. I messaged her, but she replied that although she loves me, she cannot support me following my actions, and suggested we should not communicate for some time. I feel a sense of betrayal. I love my sister but resent her for her current actions. I'm holding on to hope that my husband won't succumb to her. The day has been exhausting, and I'm uncertain about my feelings or what to do next. I yearn for a return to normalcy. I apologize for the lengthy outpouring. I needed to express my feelings. I acknowledge my wrongdoing, but I never envisioned the situation escalating to this extent. I'm filled with remorse.